Angels, it's Hailey Reese, and I hope that you guys are having a fantastic morning, afternoon, night, whatever it is for you when this video finally reaches you. Today's video, you guys, is one that I've been meaning to make for a while. Because if you guys aren't new to my channel and you've seen some of my previous videos, you may or may not have binge watched or just watched a couple of videos from my haunted house series, and in that series I talked about the fact that my imaginary friends weren't so imaginary. And this video is going to be diving into imaginary friends as a whole, but then diving into a couple of terrifying true imaginary friend stories that may or may not keep you up at night, but also might make you question, was your imaginary friend imaginary? With that being said, I really want to know from you guys if you had an imaginary friend and whether or not you believe it was truly a figment of your imagination, or if you think maybe something paranormal was going on. But before we get into today's video, I would just very quickly like to thank today's video sponsor, Surfshark. Now, Surfshark is a VPN, or in other words, a virtual private network, to help you protect all of your personal information online. As somebody whose entire life pretty well, and I use that loosely, but my entire work life and just like my social life most of the time revolves around the internet, it's so important for me to protect my personal and private information. And on top of that, I travel a ton and continuously find myself uploading videos or connecting with you guys on public Wi-Fi networks. One of my favorite things about Surfshark is that they protect your personal information while you're using public Wi-Fi to protect you from people who are attempting to steal your passwords, your credit card information, your personal information, etc. while utilizing public Wi-Fi, which is so important to me. Beyond that, Surfshark has a ton of other advantages, such as, have you ever been wanting to watch a certain show or video or movie that's only available in a particular country that you are not in? Well, with Surfshark, you're able to change the country that you're viewing from without actually being there, so you're able to have access to those shows, movies, etc. that otherwise you wouldn't be able to without having to be in that country. You're also able to protect yourself from targeted ads because there are strictly no logs, meaning nobody knows what you're doing online, not even Surfshark. There is so much to love about using Surfshark that I'm just scraping the surface right now, but if you guys would like to take your privacy online more seriously and stream things that you otherwise wouldn't be able to, plus a ton more, make sure you guys click the link down in my description and use my code GHOST, and you'll be able to receive 83% off plus 1 extra month for free. So thank you so much to Surfshark for sponsoring today's video. And without further ado, let's get right on into this. So imaginary friends are essentially a companion that a child has thought up in their imagination and regularly confides in, plays with, or interacts with on a daily basis. Now, having an imaginary friend does not by any means indicate that there's something wrong with that child, but in some instances, children who have been through traumatic events may or may not create imaginary friends as a form of companionship and comfort for them. It's like they have this person to rely on that may or may not be there. But it doesn't take trauma to have an imaginary friend. In fact, a large majority of children will have had or have at some point an imaginary friend during their childhood. In 2004, a study revealed that by the age of 7, 65% of children would have an imaginary friend, which was very interesting and kind of led into the debate of, are these truly imaginary friends, or could they perhaps be something more in certain instances? Another interesting fact about imaginary friends is that the typical age range for children who have imaginary friends is between the ages of 3 to 11. Although that's just the majority. Of course, children could have imaginary friends during different ages as well, but that's typically the age range of those who have imaginary friends. So overall, there are a couple of different theories surrounding imaginary friends. And the first being is that some parents believe their children have created imaginary friends just to blame the bad things they're doing on. So the child might do something that will get them in trouble, and if caught, oh, it wasn't me, it was blank. Another theory is that these children just have very wild imaginations and their brains are flourishing and they're kind of just exploring what they could think up in their mind, and they have this friend for that. Another theory, like I said, is that a child's been through a traumatic experience and the only companion that they have or that they feel like they can rely on is this person that they've really created in their imagination. And then another theory is that imaginary friends, in some cases, aren't so imaginary at all. That in fact, children are seeing ghosts, spirits, entities alike, and the parents think it's just a regular, run-of-the-mill imaginary friend, when it's not. Now, there's plenty of other theories as well, but those are the ones we're going to be talking about today. Actually, more specifically, we're going to dive into the theory of them being imaginary friends. Now, where it gets even more interesting, though, is that in the categories of imaginary friends, and this is just my prefacing, you guys, before we get into the stories, is that imaginary friends as a whole, when looking at them as a whole, don't necessarily have to indicate something that nobody can see. It could be a child's doll or stuffed animal or something of that nature that they believe is real, they believe speaks to them, which again, could be imagination, could be a companionship thing, could be a million different things psychologically, but in other cases it could be paranormal, which, like I said, is what we're diving into today. So imaginary friends don't necessarily just fall into the category of invisible friends. It's just imaginary. Could be a doll, could be a bear, could be a silly toy. But either way, they're having interactions with it that others don't see. Now, typically with imaginary friends, it's similar experiences until it's just not. A lot of them break down to or come down to this child interacts with it all the time. They may be talking in their room to either this toy or this invisible person, and they may be bringing them to dinner or really hanging out with them, which actually kind of fits the bill for me as a kid. But then these circumstances, these situations, these encounters go steps further in some situations where suddenly you're looking at it and you're like, there's no way in the world this is thought up in their imagination, as what follows next is unexplainable. And that leads me into today's 3 specific stories that may make you rethink if your kid has an imaginary friend. So the first imaginary friend story has to do with a little girl named Izzy. Now, up until the age of 8, Izzy never showed any signs of confiding in imaginary friends. She was never the kid to make up friends. In fact, her parents described her as a kid who didn't even really make believe with her dolls. She was just one of those kids that would play outside and enjoy the outdoors, but she never did any of that doll role play. She never spoke to anything that wasn't there. In fact, she'd given no signs that she would ever even communicate with anything on the other side. Until one day, her parents hear her in her room talking to someone. Curious, her parents head to her room. They open up the door and they ask Izzy who she was talking to. And Izzy explains to them that she just met a new friend named Arthur, who was a little kid just like her. And when her parents asked where Arthur was, Izzy pointed to a section of the room that nothing was in. Now, initially, her parents thought that she'd kind of piqued her imagination. Like I said, she was never that type of kid to play with dolls like that or play with anything of that nature. She kind of just went outside, did her thing. She never had any real demonstration that she had a wild imagination to that degree. So they assumed that her imagination was peaking, and they let it go on until eventually Izzy would start to get angry. Izzy would start to hurt her siblings. Izzy would do all of these things that were so out of character for her, even at such a young age. And every single time it would come down to, Arthur told me to. Now, at first, Izzy's parents thought that Izzy was just like what we spoke about earlier. One of those kids that wanted someone to blame her lashing out on. And so eventually they went and talked to the family doctor. They went to go and figure out what they could do. But it was strange, because when they would leave the house, Izzy would demonstrate no signs of that behavior. Izzy would not talk about Arthur, and the doctor didn't see what the parents were talking about. But back home, things were getting worse and worse and worse. And where it finally peaked was when Izzy told them, I don't want to see Arthur anymore. Arthur's starting to hurt me. and I'm scared. Now at first, they were very confused as to what was going on with their daughter, until eventually certain bruises would appear in places that Izzy could never have reached or done to herself. Frustrated, her family finally took her to somebody spiritual, and before even saying anything, the woman looks at Izzy and says, "There's a little boy spirit around her. He was abused and actually killed on your property years and years before. Izzy's exactly his age now. He's connecting with her, and he's putting her through, slowly but surely, all the different feelings that he felt. The anger, the lashing out, telling her to do things, and then eventually hurting her." And she told them that they would have to move from their house. The family was skeptical over the whole thing at first, but it just made so much sense, and eventually they wound up moving from their property. And Izzy never spoke of Arthur again, and that was the end of the whole experience. But it was all just far too coincidental for them to think that Arthur was truly a figment of Izzy's imagination, because it all just ended when they left. And that spiritual individual had no idea about it before they went in, and she said about a little boy right next to Izzy, tormenting Izzy. Creepy. But moving on from that, things get even creepier in the next two stories that I'm going to share with you guys. In a book, Psychic Kids by Lynn Gallagher, she attempts to explain the unexplained incidences that occur with children. And that leads me into a story with Lorenda and Ben, who moved into a Victorian-era house with their 6-year-old daughter, Anna. Anna started talking about this little girl named Jess. And more specifically, Anna started refusing allowing the family dog into her room because supposedly Jess was terrified of the family dog. Her parents decided to talk it out and decide what to do going forward, and her father more specifically said that this was normal behavior for children. Children develop invisible friends, and that it was nothing to be worried about, so they decided to just continue on with life. But their daughter's pleas about the family dog only grew and grew, and her talk about Jess did the same. One night, the lights went out in the family house, and Lorenda went down to the living room where her daughter was asleep on the couch to light some candles. This is where it gets so strange, you guys. Then she sees next to her daughter a little girl stroking her daughter's hair. Alarmed, she screams, but the child doesn't acknowledge her. And it wasn't until the family's dog Lulu started barking at her that the child took notice. The child got up, ran to the door, let out a blood-curdling scream, supposedly leaving behind a pool of blood, which validated to her that her daughter had been telling the truth, and that was probably Jess. And then we move into 3-year-old Rebecca. Now, Rebecca started talking about a little boy named Jonathan all the time, which her parents thought was just nothing more than an invisible friend. They actually didn't think much of it, you guys, until she started complaining about her closet as well, saying that Jonathan was in the closet. But still, they thought that it was just a typical child and just a typical invisible friend. Her parents figured that eventually she would grow out of it, as all children do, and kind of just brushed off any talk about Jonathan and any talk about the closet. That was until the family decided to move to a bigger house. In doing so, some things would be brought to light that would forever change this family's views on imaginary friends. 4 months after the family had moved out of that home, you guys, the new owners had contacted them. Supposedly, in Rebecca's room, in the closet, they found a trap door. Upon opening up the trap door, they found a box. Inside of the box was baby photos and baby clothes. And written on the box was Jonathan's. Which, that story just reminds me so much of my story that I shared with you guys, because my mom was the same way. She thought that my invisible friend was just my invisible friend until it was later validated, and it scared the living daylights out of her, but it just brought so much validation and validity to my story. So those are the creepy, or a couple of them anyways. There's more if you guys want a part 2. Stories of invisible friends. And I want to know from you guys, number 1, which story of the 3 scared you the most? But number 2, did you guys have an invisible friend? If so, do you think it was just an invisible friend, or do you think it was something more? I really want to hear you guys' stories down below, because I really enjoy going through all of the comments on videos like this and hearing your personal stories, if you're comfortable, of course. But that is it, you guys. The not so imaginary friends. What's your guys' view on imaginary friends? Do you think that children's imaginations just run super wild? Or do you think there's something more? I, for one, know that from my personal experiences, there is no way that all invisible friends are made up. There's something more to some of them, because at least with my story, that was the case. But I want to know what you guys think. Once again, I want to say thank you so much to Surfshark for sponsoring today's video. Make sure you guys take advantage and click the link down in my description and use my code GHOST. Like I said, you will receive 83% off plus 1 extra month free. So thank you so much for sponsoring, and I hope that you guys enjoy it. And with that being said, if you are new to my channel or you are just not yet subscribed but you do enjoy my videos, I would really love it if you would go ahead and click that subscribe button, and please give this video a big thumbs up if you did enjoy it. Remember, my loves, do all things with kindness, and until next time, I love you.